For a long time, every international climate summit was tied to one goal: limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Spoiler alert, we've missed it. But I swear this episode is not all doom. There is plenty of bad news about climate change. And if you look for good news, it feels Pollyannish or too good to be true. The internet is full of stories about new solar roads, or algae that can eat plastic, or ways that rocks can remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Maybe one of those things will become as commonplace as gas stations one day. But right now, there is some positive news to look at that's not tied to any one technology. It's that we are not cooking the planet as fast as we once thought we would. A huge factor is the adoption of clean energy and the shift away from coal. It is happening faster than we could have imagined when scientists first started writing temperature projections. Is it possible that things could get better? There is one really important factor.
What's the number one source of uncertainty determining where we fall? It's human decisions. Predicting human decisions is the most uncertain science there is. I mean, if we could predict human decisions, we'd be out making fortunes on the stock market, right?
This is Katharine Hayhoe, who is a climate scientist, a professor at Texas Tech University, and chief scientist for the Nature Conservancy. Full disclosure, I'm a volunteer board member for the Washington State chapter of the Nature Conservancy. Though, even if I didn't have that connection, I would still want to talk to Katharine. She has a unique way of distilling these complex topics down to something more digestible. You may have heard from Katharine before. She's a prolific social media user, has one of the most viewed TED Talks of all time, and writes a newsletter that compiles good news on climate. And yes, she also includes what she calls not so good news. Katharine joined me to talk about the different possible temperatures we may face and why it's not too naive to think we can still make a difference as humans. I'm Amy Harder, and you're listening to Shocked. Today, Temp Agency. Hello there, Katharine. It's great to see you again.
Great to see you too, Amy.
Yeah, well, thanks so much again for taking the time to chat with us. Really looking forward to this conversation. I want to kind of zoom out a bit here and level set on projections. So all the ways we have tried to calculate and estimate how much the planet is going to warm. You are probably the foremost experts on these topics, so I look forward to diving into it with you. And in fact, I spoke with you not too long ago for a story I wrote about how we're actually not doing as bad as we might think we are on climate change. And specifically, we're no longer on the path to a world where we're warming 5 degrees Celsius or more. And it seems like we don't talk about that enough. Now, I wrote that article before President Trump won a second term in office, and things have obviously changed, and we'll get to that. But first, I kind of want to just get a base load, no pun intended in terms of electricity, base load understanding of projections. So there have been a lot of degrees flying around for 20 plus years, and I want to compare where we are with where we could have been. So can you talk me through some of the different temperature projections that climate scientists have put out there over the last, say, 30 years?
I absolutely can. The first projections were actually made by a Swedish scientist named Samantha Henig back in the 1890s. He calculated the very first climate model by hand. It took him 2 years. Somewhere in there, his wife packed up the family and left because he was just too involved in the climate modeling in between his Nobel Prize-winning physical chemistry work.
And he wrote it by hand?
By hand. He calculated a climate model by hand to show how much the world would warm if we increase the levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere by 50%, or if we doubled or we tripled or so on. And the numbers he calculated back in the 1890s are astonishingly similar to the numbers that we get today. And since then, scientists have developed greater and greater ranges of projections to study what is going to happen depending on the choices we make. And here's the most important thing to know about scenarios. And I wrote the scenarios chapter for the U.S. National Climate Assessment, so I can tell you, I know scenarios backwards, forwards, and inside and out. The most important thing anyone needs to know about future scenarios is that the number one source of uncertainty in terms of what will happen in the future is us. Our choices are the number one source of uncertainty. And so that's a bit scary, but it's also empowering because it means that when we look at these future projections, we have agency. It is up to us collectively where we fall. And so we use these projections to actually help to influence decision. So let me give you a very concrete example. Back 20 years ago, I led a study for the state of California. We looked at the difference for California between a higher versus a lower scenario. The difference in the snowpack, the water supply, the grape production, the sea level rise, the forest fire, wildfire risk. We looked at the difference between higher versus lower because we wanted to show what impact human choices would have. And that study led to the first executive order in the entire United States signed by a Republican governor limiting greenhouse gas emissions for California, which at that time was, I think, the 7th largest economy in the world. Obviously, we can't do it alone. We can do it together. And if you have the 7th largest economy in the world, that's a pretty good player there. Limiting greenhouse gas emissions. And in that executive order, they specifically cited our study saying, we don't want this higher future. And we know that if we reduce emissions and encourage others to do so too, we can get closer to this lower future. So these scenarios are a tool to illustrate the impact of our choices and to help inform our decisions today.
So to simplify it almost too much, it seems like we have like a big increase, medium increase, or smaller increase in temperature. Where are we today with, if we just stayed the course now with what we have on the books for climate policies, what would the temperature rise be? Would it be close to the high increase, medium increase, or low increase?
Right now, with the policies that we have in place as of 2025, the world is tracking to a temperature increase that is on the medium higher side. So I'll pick medium, but add a little higher to it. So we've been looking for the last 30, 40 years, scientists have been looking at a range of future temperature changes typically in Celsius, because both science and the rest of the world outside the US operates in Celsius. So we've been looking at temperature increases ranging between 1 degree Celsius up to 5 or 6 degrees Celsius. So in Fahrenheit, that would be like 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit up to about 10 or 11 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the range we've been looking at. Now, people might say, well, there's a 10 degree Fahrenheit difference between the room I'm in and outside right now. So why would that be a big deal? But what they don't realize is that over human timescales, the temperature of the whole Earth, because we're not talking about weather from day to day in a certain place, we're talking about global average, over human civilization, over humans on this planet, the lifetime of humans on this planet, the average temperature of the planet has been as stable as that of the human body. So our body temperature goes up and down by a few tenths of a degree every day, and that's normal and natural. And the Earth's temperature goes up and down by a few tenths of a degree year to year, decade to decade, and that's normal and natural. But if our body temperature spiked by 2 degrees Fahrenheit in a very short period of time, which is exactly what the Earth's temperature has done, then we'd be feeling really achy, we'd be taking Tylenol, we'd be calling the doctor, we'd be wondering who coughed on us or what we ate, we'd be taking a COVID and a flu test. That's where the Earth is right now. We are at that level of literally running a 2 degree Fahrenheit fever. We're already running that fever. So we've already got there. We've already passed the lower limit today of those scenarios. But imagine if your body's running a, 5, 6, 7 degree fever. That is life-threatening. And it's the same for our planet. It's not about saving the planet. The planet will be orbiting the sun long after we're gone, no matter what temperature it is. But we humans, our civilization is perfectly adapted to this narrow band of temperature conditions that can go up and down by a few tenths of a degree, but they can't just skyrocket by multiple degrees in a matter of decades. It puts us all at risk. So in this range, where we are currently, with current trajectory, is heading towards about 3 degrees Celsius. That's about 5 degrees Fahrenheit of warming by the end of the century. And if you apply 5 degrees Fahrenheit to the human body, that's a whopping temperature that would put you in the hospital. But it's certainly a lot better than where we were heading 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, and for all the decades before that, we were tracking towards a 5-degree warmer world, which is, 9 degrees Fahrenheit. So where we are today is certainly better than where we were 10 years ago. And so knowing that we've made progress is really important, because all too often people feel like we've made no progress whatsoever. And if they think we've made no progress, then our motivation for making more progress is very low. It's as if you're climbing Mount Everest and you've been climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing for days. And then if somebody told you, oh, you're actually at the trailhead, you haven't moved an inch, you would just give up. But if somebody said, it looks like the top of Mount Everest is as far away as it was, but you've actually made it halfway to the first base camp, you'd be encouraged. You'd be like, oh, we're actually halfway to the first base camp, or even further, we can make it that far, and then maybe we could go on to the second one. So understanding that we've made progress is really important, and we just don't talk enough about that. Well, at the same time, of course, we still need to talk about how we need to make more progress.
I think the temperature comparison to the human body is so helpful. So thank you, because I myself have struggled with grasping on an emotional human level, well, 1.5 degrees Celsius or 5 degrees Celsius is not that much. But the way you just explained it in terms of the human body temperature made something click inside my head. So thank you. And I hope the whole world understands that analogy. Do you think it was ever realistic that we were going to hit either the high or low end of that range you mentioned earlier? I think it was 1 to 5 degrees Celsius. And put simply, aren't both of those the extreme side of what was most likely?
I would say it was not outside the realm of possibility. And again, what's the number one source of uncertainty determining where we fall? It's human decisions. Predicting human decisions is the most uncertain science there is. I mean, if we could predict human decisions, we'd be out making fortunes on the stock market, right? So that's why actually I chose my research field, which is I study what a much warmer world or a moderately warmer world or a little bit warmer world will look like in terms of affecting our power bills if we live in Houston, Texas, affecting kids' asthma if you live in the Valley in California. Really bringing it home to make decisions. Because imagine if we didn't know that smoking caused lung cancer, right? And I mean, thinking back to my mother's generation, sometimes a doctor would even recommend that you drink during pregnancy to fortify your blood, right? Yes. So if we didn't know that our increasing dependence on fossil fuels was causing all kinds of pollution and climate problems, then I think many people, most of the world would just continue doing it, right? Like if you don't know that smoking is bad for your lungs or drinking during pregnancy is bad, you just keep on doing it. I would probably be smoking with the best of them. They said it was good for your nerves, right? But I don't, because of the health impacts. And so if scientists hadn't studied this and quantified these impacts in increasing detail for, at this point, well over a century, then the world wouldn't have started to pivot as soon as it had. So, 5 degrees Celsius wouldn't have been out of the picture. And also, remember, we don't know for sure how the climate system is going to respond. And there's these horrible things called vicious feedbacks in the climate system where, especially in the Arctic, the warmer it gets, the more heat-trapping gases the Arctic emits from all the organic material that's been sitting in the soil decomposing there. So there's these vicious cycles in the climate system that can really amp up our warming. Now, let's go way, way, way back to when I was a baby and Jimmy Carter put solar panels on the White House during the 70s oil crisis. So it turns out that, and this horrified me, more of our carbon emissions have been produced since I was born than the 300 years of the Industrial Revolution before that. So back when Jimmy Carter was putting solar panels in the White House, if the world had taken climate change seriously then, which in fact, the first time scientists formally warned a U.S. president of the need to act was Lyndon B. Johnson in the 1960s. So if they had taken scientists' warnings back in the 1960s and early 70s, I think a 1 degree Celsius warming was actually quite realistic. So the answer to your question is yes, these possibilities are very possible. And what has gotten to the point where now both of them look less probable? Human decisions.
After the break, a quick round of questions.
Carry the Two is the show that pulls back the curtain to reveal the mathematical and the statistical gears that turn the world. Co-hosts Katie Witkowski and Ian Martin bring unique perspectives from the fields of mathematics and statistics to convey how mathematical research drives the world around us. With each episode tackling a different topic, subscribe to Carry the Two, part of the award-winning University of Chicago podcast network.
I want to do sort of a rapid fire, making sure I understand what you just said. So we have 3 scenarios. Let's just call it small, medium, large temperature increase. We're at 3 degrees, could have been worse, and it still will be bad. How secure is this position, considering where we're at today, and we're talking in 2025, where President Trump has repealed most climate policies and has rolled back renewable energy, and the geopolitical implications of the Trump presidency across all topics, including climate change, is pretty precarious. Could we go back closer to that 5-degree scenario?
That's a great question, and it's one that definitely occupies my mind, and I don't think it's possible to really definitively predict, again, because human behavior is the hardest thing to predict, right? However, what we do know now in 2025 is that the clean energy revolution is so far advanced that trying to return the world to coal at this point, which is the dirtiest, most polluting source of energy we have, is like Henry Ford has already built his assembly line and he's already turning out Model T Fords for 10 years, and you're trying to get people to go back to horses and buggies. I think that the US is actually falling behind in the clean energy technology. It is actively walking itself and its economy and its technology backwards. It is weakening its science. It is failing to invest in cutting edge technologies and markets. And I think the rest of the world is moving ahead without the US.
So you say that the energy transition is so far along that whatever the Trump administration tries to do, it won't reverse it, right? So the question then is the pace.
Yes, it can't reverse it, but it can slow it.
So how much do you think the Trump administration could slow down the energy transition? And to what degree will it change the pace for just the United States versus, say, China?
That's a great question. So I think of the energy transition as a giant boulder that is already rolling down the hill in the right direction. And it's got a lot of factors and people pushing that boulder. Everybody from investors who see new opportunities, to people who care about climate change, to people who just want affordable energy or independence. There's a lot of factors and people pushing that boulder down the hill. But standing in the way of that boulder are a few key things. First of all, for us humans, change takes energy. Just being who we are, sometimes it's just hard to change. We don't like change. We don't want change. So that's factor number one. Factor number two is the fact that our entire economy is built, and I'm talking about the global economy, is built on a hugely flawed premise. And it always has been. Our economy is built as if we live on a flat and infinite planet. as if there are always more resources to come into the system at no cost, and as if all of the pollution and waste we produce can be put far away where it doesn't bother us anymore. Well, that isn't possible on a round planet. So our economic system is physically inaccurate in that it doesn't put a price on the massive almost 10 million deaths from air pollution every year, the hundreds of billions of dollars of damages from climate change supersizing extreme weather events. Those are not included in our economy without a price on carbon. So that's the problem. Number two. Number three is the fact that fossil fuels are massively subsidized. Fossil fuels are subsidized to the tune of almost $1,000 US per person per year. And I'm talking about the richest corporations in the world collecting these subsidies in terms of tax breaks and access to resources, and then obviously the damages from pollution and from climate change. So that's the third force pushing against this boulder, is the fact that it is not a level playing field, economically speaking. So this current U.S. administration is adding their hand to the forces pushing back on this boulder. They can't stop it, but they can definitely slow it down, especially in the U.S.
So I want to go back and link it back up to what the Trump administration is doing and also saying. I'm paraphrasing now, but the Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, said something the other day about how climate change is really not that big of a deal. It doesn't really impact people on a daily basis. What do you say to something like that? And have you tried to have a conversation with the Energy Secretary? Would you talk to him? Is there anything there that you think would be important to say?
Unfortunately, I have seen the Energy Secretary make a number of statements on X that are categorically untrue. And the scientists who work for the Department of Energy or, wrote the National Climate Assessment or any other scientist would be able to tell him that. And first of all, I think we have to understand where these comments are coming from, because people often interpret them as science denial. And they say, oh, people need to be more educated or they're not smart enough to know what the science is. No, that is not the case. 99.9%, possibly even 100%, but I'm willing to give a 0.1% there. The vast majority of comments poo-pooing the reality, the severity of climate change are motivated by solution aversion. That's a term that basically means I don't want to fix it. And if I don't want to fix it, but it's affecting people all around the world every day, which it is, then I wouldn't sound like a very good person. I'm not talking about necessarily the secretary. I'm just talking about all of the people, many, many, many people who say things like it's not real, it's not human caused, it's not serious, we don't need to do anything about it, or even people who say it's too late. All of those are actually manifestations of solution aversion. I don't want to fix it. But if it's really that bad and I don't want to fix it, that would make me a bad person. And I'm not a bad person. I'm a good person. So that means we engage in what's called motivated reasoning, where we've made up our mind ahead of time, and then we use our very smart brain. And actually, research shows the smarter we are, the better we are at doing this. So if anything, this is correlated with intelligence rather than any lack of it. We use our brain to go out and find reasons to explain why we're right. We have to understand that his rejection of the severity of climate change is coming from the fact that he doesn't want to fix it. And he doesn't want to fix it because, and I'm generalizing here too, because it isn't just him, it's everybody who doesn't want to fix it. They don't want to fix it because they think the solutions pose a greater threat to their ideology, identity, and well-being than the impacts do. And so if you're going to have any constructive conversation with someone who says it's not real or it's not human caused or it's not serious or we can't fix it, you have to help them see how there are solutions that are consistent and compatible with their ideology, their identity, and what they view as their well-being. So in that sense, while I'm always happy to have a conversation with anyone, if they don't want to talk to me, the conversation isn't going to go well.
Want to, talk about communication and information getting out into the world. And you're one of the clearest communicators on this issue out there. But then there's also this misinformation mess that we have that's plaguing all parts of our world. Between the technological policy side versus communication side, which one do you think is the bigger hurdle?
So I look at the data to try to answer that question, being a scientist. And the data is very illuminating. If you look in the US and at the global scale, these same trends are true for the US, for Canada, for the EU, and at the global scale. The majority of people are worried about climate change. And so pair that with the fact that most of our communication on climate change is about the ice sheets, the ocean circulation, the polar bears, which makes people more worried. We're not investing in where the changes have to happen. We don't need more worried people. What we need, the data shows, is we need more people who have, as I think of, connected their head to their heart. So around the world, most people are worried. That's the head. But then you ask people, do you think it will affect you personally? The numbers drop almost in half. They haven't made the head to heart connection. And if we don't think it affects us personally, we're not going to make decisions and support policies because we don't think it matters to us. And then you ask people, do you think you can make a difference? And the numbers plummet. Nobody has connected the heart to the hands. In the US, about 68% of people are worried about climate change. About 8% are activated. So 60% of people in the US have not connected their head to their hands. 60%. And then you ask people, do you ever have a conversation about this? And most people say no. How do humans ever act? How do we ever do anything together? It begins by having a conversation, not about the head, the polar bears, the ice sheets, but about the heart and the hands. And so the Yale program on climate change communication, they study what do people need to know to support climate policy, to take climate action, to have conversations at their school, their place of work, their neighborhood, their church, their business, their city about what we can do together. This is what we need to know. We need to know that it's real, it's human caused, it's serious, and scientists agree. We need to know those things. But we also need to know that others agree. We're not the minority. Most people are worried about it. And the last thing we need to know is there's hope. If we do something, it will make a difference. So if we can help people connect the head to the heart to the hands, that is like knocking over the first domino in that long chain of dominoes that could lead us to that better future.
I also think it's very important to have serious conversations and genuine conversations about this topic, because oftentimes in my conversations with my friends about energy and climate, it ends up being sort of the butt of a joke. Like when you go and recycle, you're like, oh, is this going to hurt the turtles or what have you? And it ends up being sort of a funny afterthought. And I don't know if that's some sort of like head in the sand denial coping mechanism. But for me, that's something I struggle with, is having serious like not serious, like, ooh, we're in a classroom and it's homework type serious, but like genuine conversations about these things. That's something that I want to work on at least.
I think you're totally right. And it is a defense mechanism. So for example, when I fly very carefully because I discovered a long time ago the greatest part of my carbon footprint is actually flying to scientific meetings and conferences to talk about climate change. So when I fly, I organize so many events in advance. And we're speaking together here, Amy, just before Climate Week. I have well over 40 events in a single week in New York. So the carbon footprint of each event is as if I literally, drove 10 minutes to get there from where I live per event. So I bundle my events incredibly when I travel to make every ounce of carbon count and to be effective with what I do. And then during the pandemic, I found out that some airlines were flying thousands of empty flights just to keep their gate assignment. And so my sense of efficacy just tanked. I was like, this is ridiculous. What am I doing? I'm wasting all my time on this excruciating planning to maximize every ounce of my personal carbon. And they're just wasting gigantic tons of carbon. And so that's the same when we recycle or when we make our personal choices. We realize there's other people doing stuff that are completely negating what we do, and our efficacy tanks. And so instead of staying in our head, that's where the heart and the hands come in. Really understanding how our personal lives are being affected, and then understanding that when we work together, change can happen. So that's why every week in my newsletter, Talking Climate, I share Good news of what other people are doing to make a difference, not so good news about how we're being affected personally, and then what you can do with examples of how when people banded together, these changes can multiply. So, for example, when we got solar panels on our house, my husband surprised me for Christmas with them, and we bought them from a local company that supported workers who'd lost their job in the oil fields, and now they were making solar panels, which is awesome. Within 2 years, we had multiple other homes in our neighborhood with solar panels on the roof, neighbors we didn't even know. And research shows that the number one reason somebody gets solar is because somebody else near where they live has it. So they can ask for a contractor, they figure out that they can work within their budget. So having these conversations and these catalytic impacts really makes a difference. And when you look at how any climate action has ever happened, at the level of a country, a city, a business, an organization, it always happened because someone started it by using their voice. That is how we make a difference.
Well, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much, Katharine.
Likewise, Amy. Thank you for having me.
I always feel like I understand these issues better after talking with Katharine. I also feel very aware that if the biggest uncertainty is us, many people may not be feeling too optimistic right now. I wanted to hear what Michael thought. Hey there, Michael. Good to see you again.
Terrific to see you, Amy, and so great to hear you talking to a climate scientist. I hope that doesn't mean your stripes have changed. I know that you know that economists are the best.
Well, I am neutral. I think they're all of you scientist type people, expert type people play an important role. But it was great to talk with Katharine. One thing that I found helpful in my conversation with Katharine is because we really went to the 30,000 foot level of this topic and issue and problem. And, I think it's really interesting that for the longest time, before the Paris Climate Agreement of a decade ago, we were on track to warm up to 5 degrees Celsius, which, as Katharine was talking about, is a lot if you consider the Earth like a human body. But now when I'm looking at the data, McKinsey released a report just the other day that shows some different pathways. And the slowest pathway they have on there is, I think they call it slowed momentum or slower evolution. And it's still a downward slope of emissions. It's a 2.7 degrees Celsius pathway. And that, again, is going to be terrible in many ways. Don't get me wrong. We're talking about bad versus less bad. But I think it's interesting that that progress is still being made. And I guess my question for you, Michael, is, do you think there's a chance that the energy transition could kind of stop the progress that we've made and sort of stay on here, like in a plateau of where we're at in the transition? And could there be enough slowed momentum where this is it? This is what we're going to get? Or do you think it's inevitable that the transition will continue, even if it's happening at different paces in different countries?
Okay, great question. So here's, I think, what's absolutely true is the upward trend in CO2 emissions globally seems to be slowing down. And then if you project forward, the standard projections have us getting off that upward trend and kind of meandering along at the same level to the end of end of the century. And so, I don't know, do you think of that as half full or half empty? I think if we were to get off that upward trend, that would definitely be half full. Do we have to go to zero? I don't think there's anything that says that we're going to go to zero. Maybe there's some hope, but I don't really think hope is like a strategy. And we might get lucky, but what is it? That luck is the result of hard work and perspiration or something like that?
Preparation also.
Yeah, and preparation.
Maybe for you, perspiration.
Preparation and perspiration. That's right. That I think that would be a much more likely to work than, hey, maybe we'll just get lucky. There was one other thing I wanted to come back to, that listening to your conversation with Katharine, what Katharine was highlighting is, the difficulty in going from people who think about climate change or recognize it or have some interest in it, to those who are activated to doing about it, that 68% of people in polls care about climate change, but, and I think by her numbers, only 8% are actually doing something. And, it reminded me of your terrific conversation with Hina Carr in episode 2. And Pakistan is just coming off of a summer where 40 million people lost their homes due to floods. And she said, we don't have any deniers for climate change in Pakistan. That also reminded me of like the inequality of climate impacts and how that can make you see the problem so differently.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I appreciated that comment from Hina. At the same time, I think at least here in the United States, and as we've established, we're special. City
on the hill.
Exactly. And, I think the COVID-19 pandemic was not a good thing, but how should I phrase this? A stark example of people denying something that is very much real and in front of them. I mean, people died of COVID while refusing to think COVID is a problem, at least here in the United States. So I think that's not going to be a winning strategy here in the United States. I think we will continue to see terrible forest fires. The fires in LA earlier this year. I mean, that was this year, which is insane considering everything else that's happened and so many other things that have happened in the United States. I don't know if it will be bad enough to change opinions among a certain part of the population. I think they may die refusing to think it's a problem. And I think that seems to be something uniquely American.
Yeah, look, we have a hard time with the science of climate change. And I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out why. I don't have a great answer, but I will just keep coming back to the fact that climate change impacts on net are not going to be that great for the United States. That is, they will not be that large on net. Some places will benefit, some places will be harmed. I think that's part of the puzzle. Doesn't explain the whole thing. And I think that's what Hina was getting at. Like in Pakistan, like they're in the bullseye for climate impacts, or climate damages. And so like, there's not a lot of room. Like here, you can have some room. Like, and if you live in northern Minnesota, you kind of know the winters are horrible. And if it got a little warmer, that wouldn't be so bad. But like, I think Pakistan doesn't really have those.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a matter of time and intensity until slowly opinions will change. And it may happen long after.
But I agree, the puzzle of American exceptionalism on denying climate, I don't. I think what I'm offering is maybe a small part of the solution, explanation, but I'm a little bit, I've been at a loss to understand it.
I also think that the impacts of climate change, like wildfires, I think oftentimes people may not necessarily connect, we need to build this wind farm so then this wildfire is less bad. That's not how it goes. To have a less bad wildfire today, what you need to do is have good forest management. You need to not put power lines next to trees. You need to not build your home in a place prone to wildfires. And so we're having these overlapping discussions and problems that, yes, on a whole, eventually that wind farm will help cause fewer wildfires. But the dots that need to be connected are complicated and long and many. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's so hard for people in the United States who seem to not necessarily believe everything they hear. That's why it's hard for people to really get on board.
I completely agree. And, my former friend of mine who's no longer alive, unfortunately, Marty Weissman, who's a famous economist, called it the problem from hell. And so we're dealing with CO2, the forest fires, wildfires, that's from CO2 that was emitted decades ago, or even more than 100 years ago. And so to your point, like connecting that to some decision today, that is hard. That's connecting a lot of dots. And then you add to it that, the impacts will be different in different places. And maybe I don't live in the places that are going to be so negatively impacted. It's a really tough one.
Yeah, it definitely is. But that's why we have smart people like yourselves and Katharine to light the way.
Katharine was I've never met her. Total shout out to Katharine. She was amazing in that interview.
Well, Michael, I have to go. So it was good to see you. And until next time.
Okay, Amy, until next time.
Thanks, Michael. Bye-bye. Shocked is part of the University of Chicago Podcast Network. It was produced by Jesse Baker and Eric Nuzum of Magnificent Noise. Our production staff includes Christine Driscoll, Amy Pedulla, Sophie Bridges, Jamie York, and Samantha Henig. Our sound designer is Kristen Mueller. A big thanks to my co-host, Michael Greenstone, a professor at the University of Chicago and director of the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Growth. He also serves as the executive producer of Shocked, along with Sam Ori, the executive director of the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Growth. The Institute combines a 360-degree approach to education with frontier research having an impact in frontline communities globally. The Institute's efforts are driven by the need to balance climate risks with societal growth. To follow or support their work, see our show notes or visit climate.uchicago.edu. For more of my reporting, you can look for me on pretty much any social media. Search Amy Harder, or look for my byline at Axios. This is Shocked. I'm your host, Amy Harder. Thanks for listening.